Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about why we need a new type of leadership to manage corporate change. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Lata Hamilton. Welcome, Lata.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Can you share with our audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lata Hamilton, I'm a change leadership and confidence expert, and I am the founder and CEO of Passion Pioneers and the creator of the Leading Successful Change program. So you might have noticed from my accent already, I'm based in Australia. I live in beautiful Sydney. And a few fast facts about me. I'm an absolute cardio junkie, love running, swimming, yoga, skiing, anything like that. Sometimes I do have to go overseas to find the snow. Australia doesn't have much snow. I'm also I love cardio, but I'm also an absolute foodie. So I figure those two things kind of balance themselves out of it. And I'm also an avid thrift shopper. So even the top that I'm wearing is a recycled treasure. And I just love to kind of introduce myself a little bit and a little bit about, I guess, who I am and like what I bring to the table. So I help women carve their own paths for change in career, leadership, and life. And using all of my experience, I actually offer change leadership programs and change consulting services. So I am based in Australia. I've worked with some of Australia's biggest companies on some of their biggest organisational changes. I've worked on changes that have impacted over 100,000 people. I've worked on operating model changes, restructures that have impacted thousands of people. I've worked on global cultural transformations that have straddled all the continents over the world. And what I love to work on the most and what I think is very relevant, very timely, and just sort of hitting every industry, every company, and every person really is digital transformation. And I've worked on digital transformation that's literally changing the way that we work, automation, artificial intelligence, all of those buzzwords, but also just that optimization, modernization of our technology, which has become, I guess, kind of the bedrock of how we do business and what a lot of projects are focusing on. And what I would say as well is, sometimes it's like digital transformation is sort of the catalyst for a lot of other types of changes. So it might be there's a digital or technology change, and then that drives a restructure, an operating model change or layoffs, or that drives, a new way of doing processes or a new culture in the organization. So I really love that kind of intersection between how digital and technology interplays with all of the other aspects of organizational change in any industry and company.
Well, let's start with some basics because, as you said, digital transformation or global transformation, a lot of those are becoming buzzwords, and maybe there's even a question of what does that really mean? And I suppose it does differ client to client because we've even seen that. But when you talk about those type of transformations, what are you really thinking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when we actually are taking processes that are usually more manual or have a lot of blocks within their flow, sort of their end-to-end flow, especially if they're related to customer experience. So I've got a marketing background. Whenever I'm working with any of my clients or any of my projects, I'm always sort of really thinking about it from that customer perspective and how do we make it the smoothest experience for the customer and for the team. So for our people, sort of more holistically and more generally. So when we're looking at digital transformation, it kind of doesn't really matter what the technology is. It could be an enterprise resource platform. It could be an ERP. It could be an automation tool that comes in. It could be a CRM, customer relationship management tool. It could be AI coming in to do different tasks and aspects. It could be like the automation of an entire warehouse where you don't even have, people on the floor anymore. Everything's done by machinery and by big sort of trucks and tractors and things like that are essentially running themselves. So it can be different levels, different scales. It can even just be the tiniest little process change within an organization where, instead of filling out this paper form, we do it digitally. But the ramifications of that can be as complex and have as much challenge for people to adopt as some of those really kind of big changes that we think about when we think of sort of technology and digital. So it's almost like the scale, it's like just taking things and transforming the way that things are done, but then also probably the thinking behind it. the ways of working that sit behind the technology. So it's not just we do this because we've been told to do this. We do this because that's the way we've always done it. It's actually starting to think, well, why are we doing that? What's the benefit that we really want to get out of it? How do we help people have a better experience throughout the process and, you know, ongoing into the future? And how do we make sure that we can set ourselves up for success now, but also continue to grow, continue to pivot, continue to transform, and be flexible and agile for the future as well in, you know, our services, our products, our delivery, whatever it is for that particular client or organization.
And so you mentioned that change management has to change. So let's talk about a little bit of what traditional change management has looked like and what are the gaps that you're seeing with it.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start in change management. I don't think that anybody ever does start in change management. Usually people come from other backgrounds and they make the move into change. They might come from, say, learning and development background, marketing background, communications background, project management background, IT, like all of these sort of different backgrounds, and they come into change. And if you don't know what change management is, I love to define things really simply, like no textbook definitions here. I just like to like break things down and make it really super easy for people to understand and get their head around. And I just sort of define it as moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in a new way in an organization. And we do that through communications, training, and business readiness. And we don't just do it for the fun of it. We do it in order to realize the benefits of the change. And the benefits are not just like the financial benefits or like the operational and efficiency benefits. It's actually the benefits to people, the benefits around experience, ways of working, and future growth. So when it comes to sort of traditional change management, and I guess, or how when I first came into change management, how things were kind of approached, and I guess what I was seeing as being like the standard best practices, I guess, of change, it was very regimented. There was like a lot of documentation, and it sort of relied on this idea around change projects, or like any kind of projects and transformation being very planned out, you know, without getting into like different types of methodologies, but just this idea around, you know, it being very planned out. So there being a process to follow, like a bouncing ball kind of step-by-step process that you can follow to managing change. Whereas that's not the experience that I've ever had on like any of the changes that I've worked in. Like they are complex, they pivot all the time. Like I've had changes that with some projects that I've worked on where it's been like extended over 2 years, like kind of like going. The team has expanded from like 3 people, 5 people to like 100 people working on this program of work. The scope of the work has changed, and like it's still got the same philosophy behind it, but like how we're approaching the project, how we're delivering the project, the methodology that we're using, what we actually are looking to implement, what else needs to happen that gets tacked into that to make it more of a package of change to the organization is just completely transforming. So having the ability then to not necessarily follow a bouncing ball, but to have tools and skills at your fingertips where you can really kind of just plug and play things together, where you can chop and change, where you can do what's fit for purpose, what's practical, what's actually going to be useful and relevant in the moment for that project at that time. And there have been projects that I've worked on where like the very first activity I did was a post-implementation review for the project. Like I actually kind of started at the end because that was the right thing for them. They had already done like a proof of concept. So I was coming in now because they were going to scale. And so it was like, okay, cool. Well, let me run then, because I'm sort of an outsider and external. Let me run your post-implementation review and see what kind of experience you want to have as a project, what kinds of results you want to deliver as a project into the business for like the next stage for the pilot where we scale up. So it's kind of like being able to have that fluidity and flexibility, not necessarily following a process, instead having those tools, having those templates, having those techniques at your fingertips, and then doing what's really going to add value in the moment. And I think that's also probably where we also see a bit of a shift from maybe managing change. I know that sort of like more traditionally we talk about change management, and it's this idea of like kind of almost like managing problems and going, okay, what's the problem that we're going to experience, and then how are we going to fix it, solve it all along the way. Whereas I think about change more from the aspect of inspiring change. How are we going to switch on hearts and minds? How are we going to engage people through all levels of the organization, from the frontline teams right through to senior leadership, the C-suite, and even the board of directors in many cases as well. So it's like, how do we engage through, how do we transform what people believe is possible for them, not just in the organization through transition, but also into the future, and starting to, like, I call it managing through change. So not just kind of going, here's the end point, because I definitely have worked on projects where, like, within 2 weeks of the project launching, the whole project team is disbanded and change management isn't around anymore. And so it's like, well, how do we actually embed into the organization? How do we take things deeper? How do we support those teams through the change and into the future, and then pave the way for future changes? Because we know that future changes are going to come. So instead of thinking like, this change starts, this change ends, or this project starts and this project ends, it's like, great, how do we set up the pipeline, set up the transformation programs for the future, using every change that comes before it, and then also reiterating and re-embedding changes that have already launched in the past into our future programs and projects as well. So a really kind of like more holistic view, but then also really tapping into that people experience side as well.
And so I guess there's some relating it back to projects and the changes and structure versus flexibility, because obviously flexibility is important. But one of the things we've seen with like agile is that when people don't apply that appropriately, they think it becomes this free for all and there's no structure, which is not at all what agile intends to do. It's not, agile actually requires more discipline and there is structure. And so, what I find when you don't have that structure, or the bouncing ball, as you were saying, that sometimes you have an issue where things fall through the cracks. So how are you suggesting that organizations plan well enough that things don't get missed without over planning to where you have an unflexible solution?
Yeah, it's a really great call out. And I guess when I got my start in change, I actually was working on an agile project. So I just thought that's how all projects were run. It wasn't until I went into some other organizations and I started working on sort of, I guess, in inverted commas, more waterfall, more planned out implementations, that I was like, oh dear, like how are we going to manage this? Because even in those really planned projects, there were pivots that had to happen. There were launch dates that had to move. It even happens with my consulting clients now, where launch dates move, by a month, like by a few weeks, by a month, by several months sometimes. So there is that element of, like, really when you stop being wedded sometimes to the dates or the times that specific things are meant to happen. Like, from a change perspective, we know that there are particular things that we know that we want to happen at particular times because it makes the most sense for people. A good example of this is training. Like, if you do training too early, you might not have the solution, especially if it's a technology solution, like the solution ready enough in advance for them to actually be trained on something that's kind of going to be close to what would actually be launched. But also it drops out of people's minds. They're not doing it every day. It's not just in time. So you kind of want to make it close enough to go live that it stays relevant for people. But by the same token, you want to also provide it far enough in advance that it's not just they're only ever getting like 1.5 hour training session on a brand new system of how they do their day-to-day processes day in, day out. That you actually give them enough time to learn that training over time, to embed it, to do actual activities there in place. On the job activities, if we think about like the 70-20-10 model, like actually going, how can we start to give you real life immersion? How can we start to give you simulations of what you will do when you go live with this? And sometimes you need a bit of extra time. So like, training is probably just one of those things where it's hard to pinpoint what is the right time. So instead of thinking about it from a time perspective, you can really think about it from an experience perspective. And here's where you could potentially start to plan out like a journey for a particular team member. So let's say you've got a senior leader in the organization or a frontline leader in the organization, and you could go, okay, we don't know when go live is going to be because we've got all of these challenges and dependencies that we're relying on. So, but we know that this is the experience that we want to give people. We know that we want to make sure that they get some tools to help lead it with their teams. We know that we want to make sure that they get training ahead of their teams so that they can answer their team's questions when it comes to frontline team training. We know that we want to then do X, Y, Z. We want to give them this resource at this time. We want to give them a little bit of coaching here on the fly, you know, at this time. And so you can actually start to, again, like it's something that I used to learn from a marketing background, which was like customer journey mapping, applying it to the team experience and applying it to the change experience instead. And then it's almost like it doesn't matter when your go live is, as long as you know what experience you want people to have, you can be delivering the experience parallel to how the project is delivering the solution or implementing the solution at the right times, teeing up, but not necessarily so wedded to it. And the alternative way that I've done in the past as well is just with a critical path and just going, great, before, like this many weeks before go live, we need to make sure these change activities are done. This many weeks after go live, like each of the weeks after go live, these are the activities that we would do. As a change manager, I always love having dates because as like from a change perspective, we also think about the broader environment, what's happening globally, what's happening in terms of public holidays, what's happening in terms of like what's happening in society, what's happening in the organization at the time. Having dates is super handy for that because you can then see where there's clashes. You can see where there might be change overwhelm, change fatigue, people's capacity is just not there, people's headspace is just not there. But when you don't have dates, there are definitely approaches that you can take where it's like, well, let's just focus on what the experience is, because if we can give people the experience, we are probably going to get the result that we want from the change, which is the real change benefits. Delivery of the system or delivery of whatever the change is not success. It's actually the success comes from realizing those benefits and actually being able to build capability in the organization, engage people correct, like in the right way that they are switched on for now and for the future, open up new channels and paths for growth in the future. Like those are the benefits. And often when you focus on the experience, you actually making sure that those benefits happen regardless of what solution gets launched. And I always like to say, like, the technology is not the solution, it's the enabler to the change. It's the enabler to the ways of working, to the experience, to the new opportunities that are coming down the line. So sort of focus on that second part and then just keep dovetailing in and keep obviously close with the actual technology implementation itself.
So taking it up, I guess, you know, out of the individual tactics, when we have some of these larger scale changes where maybe we're innovating and automating or introducing a new technology that will have a significant impact on how organizations work. How do you prepare an organization at the more global, I guess, level on change, and even maybe where it's completely altering, maybe it's getting rid of actually a whole group of type of resources because that's not going to be needed anymore because things have been automated.
Yeah. And I think that we're seeing that happen a lot more too. It was always going to happen. So if you look at any of the research, the impact that technology, digital, automation, artificial intelligence was going to have on workforces has for the last 5-10 years been documented as being like millions of people over the course of, say, 10-15 years. So it was always going to happen. COVID probably put it on pause a little bit and meant that, like, while obviously people's roles and things were impacted, I think a lot of digital changes and transformation actually occurred in order just to get companies through COVID. And now what we're seeing is the natural picking back up of a lot of these digital transformations that probably would have already happened 3 years ago. And we're starting to see those flow through now. So we are seeing some major layoffs. We're seeing quite big upheavals in workforces. We're seeing big changes in the types of skills and the types of workforce skills that are being looked at, from, again, like more manual, menial work to things that are more higher level skills, more advanced level skills. And that is a mindset shift for the workforce. Like like when we're talking about the future of work, we're talking about not necessarily having people who are just sitting there in roles, but actually about the value that they can add, about the strategies and approaches that they can take moving forward, instead of potentially just like completing manual tasks. So then we are starting to look at, well, how do we actually prepare the workforce for that? And from a global perspective, like if we think more broadly about change, it's about getting change involved really early on in the process, because what you're going to need to do is really set up that vision for the future, because we need to shake people up and wake people up and give them the path to what their future could look like, whether that's with this organization or another, whether that's in their current team, like, or another team or another department in the organization. So it's almost like opening people's minds up to the possibilities, and they're looking for leaders. They're looking for leaders that they can believe in, that they can trust in, who can inspire them, who can guide them. They're looking for people who can give them the belief in themselves to upskill and to reskill for the future. Like a lot of like workers just globally, like overall, they don't necessarily have that internal motivation, ambition, and drive to do that on their own. Of course, there are pockets that will, like, and it's like any kind of bell curve. You'll have some really savvy people who are ahead of the curve, who are absolutely jumping on the bandwagon now to upskill and reskill. You'll have like some people who will just always resist and always be behind and just be like, why can't I keep doing everything that I've been doing? Why do we need to change the way that we operate in our business or the processes that we use? But then you'll have this like kind of critical mass in the middle who they're just waiting for inspiration. They're waiting for somebody to come in and switch them on, and to switch on their hearts and minds, and to give them a reason to hope and to give them a reason to believe. They're looking for that guidance and for that direction. So when I'm working with clients, and what I also teach my students in leading successful change, is to start with an inspiring change vision. And this is a vision of the future, like regardless of the exact technology that's going to come in, but like, what do you want the organization to be doing, or for teams to do or experience, or for customers to do and experience? And to actually get people really, like usually I would do it like with the senior leadership team or with the board, but to really set that really high level vision, but to make it really meaningful, which means sometimes not using the business case benefits. Like a business case benefit might be that it's going to save time. And like, Jana, if I was asking you, like, if I was asking you, okay, you're telling an employee that it's going to save them time, like what could potentially go through their mind if you tell them that
you need them, yeah, but you won't need them anymore.
Yeah. Or so it could be, I'm going to lose my job, which triggers the survival anxiety and survival instinct. It could be, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have to work harder. Like I'm going to have to do more now, because like all of the tasks that I already knew how to do, that I've been doing, you know, time and again for the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, sometimes 20 years, is all being taken away. So now I'm going to have to work doubly hard because those manual processes aren't being done. So I'm going to have to like step up and do that. And just like a lot of fear around job loss. So like saving time, while it is absolutely crucial in the business case, it might not be the best business benefit to actually be communicating to employees. And so I'm an accredited Neuro-Linguistic Programming practitioner, so NLP for short. Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and it's the study of excellence in behavior, communications, and psychology, or our emotions. And so there are particular NLP techniques that I'll use with leadership teams and that I teach to my students, which are literally around transforming the internal meaning of the change for people. And here's where you start to get benefits that everybody can get behind. You might start to get benefits like, we're going to build trust in our organization. We're going to actually make sure that our people are developed for the future. We're going to make sure that our people are like are being trained and are building capability in current systems and current technology rather than outdated platforms. It could be that we want to actually have more movement in the organization where people can actually go and do secondments all across the business, and potentially if you've got a global organization across the world, or it could be that we want to have a great customer experience, that we want to be able to switch customers on. And like there have been times when I've done like this vision setting for leadership teams, often men, like often they are like sort of very male dominated sort of leadership teams, and at the start they're kind of like not quite understanding the difference between like a business case benefit and an employee or an experiential benefit. But once we go through this like benefits mapping process and we set this inspiring vision about what's the experience that we want customers and teams to have, like how would they live their life and how would they experience us as an organization differently and their interactions with us differently, by the end, like there's tears in their eyes because they're like, this is why we do what we do. This is why, like these are grown men. And they're like, they're feeling so inspired because they can get caught up in the day-to-day operational leading of their departments and their teams or their businesses. But when it all comes down to it, a lot of the reason why a lot of us come to work, a lot of the reason why a lot of us, are leaders in businesses or like are, running businesses and things like that, is to improve the experience of people. So when we can start to build visions, like really, really great visions around that, suddenly you've got like the leadership team on board. And so that kind of is the driving force that goes down into the organization. So obviously, like employee groups that even if they down the track might be losing their roles, there might be layoffs, there might be redundancies, getting them kind of wedded to this bigger group vision, it's like, and part of that might actually be we take care of our people. Like, yes, some of you may lose roles, but we are making a commitment up front that we're going to take care of everybody, no matter where they fall in the outcome of the operating model. So that's kind of the group vision. And then I talk about the engagement formula, which is then bringing it down to the individual. So the engagement formula is the inspiring group change vision, and then the individual vision. And this is for every individual to start to like believe for themselves and start to think for themselves, what's the experience that they want, whether it's in this company or outside. Like what's the type of work they want to do? What's the kind of experience that they want to have when they come to work? What are the kind of leaders that they want to have them switch on? What's the relationships and the interactions and the social interactions or working relationships that they have with their teammates? What do they want to be able to provide for their clients, like, and customers? What's the feedback that they want to be hearing? And actually starting to help, so like providing tools, running workshops for leaders to run with their teams, to start getting individuals thinking about what the future looks like for them. And some individuals will automatically tap themselves out and go, oh, I realize now that I've got all of this potential, I've got these dreams or goals, and this isn't going to, like, this organization isn't actually going to serve me. So you're kind of getting them to think for themselves a little bit, and you do need the group vision to help set everybody and align everybody together around what the future looks like. But then starting to go, not what's in it for me from a project or organizational senior leader perspective, but really like, what do I want to get out of it from an individual perspective? And that really looks at your holistic life. It's not just about your career. It's not just about your professional development. It's not just about your job or salary. It's like, what's the experience that I want to have at an individual level? And that engagement formula where you get the combination of both kind of is that managing through that I was talking about. You're going from senior leader led change, and then having that kind of go top down. Then you're going kind of grassroots, individual, building bottom up from the bottom. And then, like I say, that the magic happens when you meet in the middle. And that's where you get, engagement, where you get commitment, where you get follow through, where you get internal motivation, where no matter what the change happens to be, people can see the future for themselves and where they could fit in if they wanted to.
And what are, I guess, the biggest, kind of the last question, what are you find the biggest challenges are when embarking on attempting to do this?
It's probably around communication. So I take a very different approach to communication, where I think that the way that we absorb, so I've got actually a media and communications background and studied journalism at university. And back in the day, it was like big broadsheet newspapers and black and white text, and you'd sit and like read, like, and like my dad would have like the big black and white newspaper at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning, and you'd sit and kind of read like focused for like that length of time. And if we think about how communication has changed now, how do we absorb news? We absorb it through scrolling. We scroll bite-sized chunks on like social media feeds and on news feeds and on news sites, and it's multimedia and things like that. So I think it's just transforming the way that you communicate to your people, no matter what the change is, but especially if it's a more emotive change like layoffs, restructures, redundancies, operating model changes, and using communications as a tool to build trust. Using communications as a tool to have that two-way conversation with your people, with your leaders, getting them involved by creating communication channels that are just taking things to the next level. Like there's a new expectation for employees and the workforce now. And we can't probably keep, again, cookie cuttering what used to work in the past, which might have been like a big 2-page sort of essay from the CEO to people about what the change is going to mean. We need to make them more vibrant. We need to make them more punchy. We need to be able to break up that big amount of text, but then also provide real meaning in the words that we use. Talk about things in just real terms and in really simple language, and not hide behind corporate speak, and just start to treat like employees and leaders, like leadership teams and employees, as partners through the change, and like we're doing it with you rather than doing it to you. And I think that can absolutely go a long way in helping the change run more smoothly as you go to implement.
That's great. Well, you've provided a lot of content, and I really appreciate your insights. What are the top 3 things, though, that you think we should leave behind with the audience?
Yeah, I think the first one for me would be like shaking people up and waking people up. You know, really looking at inspiring and empowering customers, teams, leaders, anybody who's involved in projects, change, transformation, and actually taking a new approach and just going like, how can we take this to the next level? How can we really focus on getting an emotional shift and an emotional transformation to change the meaning now and for the future? The second thing would be that probably what I talked about, just really having a think about like the communications that you use, how everything that you do builds trust, and that like no matter when you're doing it, whether you're in a project or in a change or not, everything you do builds trust. So take every opportunity to do that and to build trust over time, because like I said, change doesn't have a start and end date. It's always rolling. You're always paving the way for future changes. So everything you do from today, it's like focus on being able to build that trust and collaboration with your leaders and teams. And then the last one is, I would say, leading change is hard. Leading change is really, really tough. Like it is a tough gig. It's really, you're working with clients, with organizations, with teams, with leaders at the times that they are struggling the most, at the times that matter the most, when they are going through their biggest challenges. So it can be really hard. So it would just be around, like, if you are leading change, if you're a change practitioner or a project manager or somebody who works in IT, or you're any type of business leader, you know, from the board down to like frontline leadership, take care of yourself and build your internal confidence and build your internal leadership skills and support yourself with that. Because for you to be able to lead change with other people, you need to be able to step up into your leadership and your light. And you're part of the change as well. You're experiencing the change as well. So build your internal confidence and your internal strength in the process.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lata, for your contributions. And how can folks find out more about what you do or where to get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So please do come and follow me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Lata Hamilton. If you do want to build that internal confidence and that strength within yourself, I have a free download. It's called Underpaid and Overlooked Coaching Action Guide, and you can grab that from latahamilton.com/worthit. And that's just really great to build that internal confidence as a leader to lead change. And yeah, if you need my help with any of the changes that you might be running, or you want to build capability, change capability or leadership capability in your teams, definitely feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can see how we can work together.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.